The cardboard box sat on my kitchen table for 3 hours before I could bring myself to touch it. 13 years of avoidance, wrapped in tape, dust, and memory. I pulled it out of my storage unit tonight because grief always knows how to find its way home on the anniversary of death. Inside were the pieces of my father's last month. Yellowed notepads covered in his careful handwriting. Case numbers, strange initials, names circled in red that meant nothing to me at 15, when all I'd wanted was for him to come home before the streetlights came on. Richard Brooks, FBI forensic man, killed in what they said was a single vehicle accident on a wet road. Case closed. Life closed. And me? I'd spent 13 years pretending that closure was the same thing as peace, until tonight. My father's handwriting stared up at me, frantic near the end. Words underlined 3-4 times. Human trafficking, political connection, offshore accounts, and one phrase repeated until the ink had bled through the page. They're watching. My phone buzzed against the table, vibrating loud in the small Portland apartment. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. The message was short. Your father didn't die in an accident. The truth is buried where he is. Go tonight. For a long minute, I couldn't move. My hands shook as I read it again. Then again. Could have been a prank. Could have been someone cruel enough to remember the date. October 27th. 13 years since I'd buried my father. I typed back, "Who is this?" No answer, just those words burning on my screen like a dare. I should have called someone. I should have ignored it. But curiosity has always been my curse, and grief is gasoline to that fire. I grabbed my jacket, my car keys, and the notebook I'd sworn I'd never open again. Cedar Hill Cemetery was 40 minutes outside the city, longer if the roads were slick. The clock on my dashboard glowed 9:47 p.m., close to the time he died, according to the report. Rain started halfway there, fine mist turning to drizzle, turning the road into a blur of silver. I remember whispering to the empty car, "Daddy, if this is a mistake, stop me." He didn't. The cemetery gates groaned as I pushed through. Cold air hit me like an unspoken warning. I parked behind a maintenance shed and killed my headlights. My father's grave sat on a hill under an old oak, the same tree I used to climb when he took me hiking before the job started stealing him away piece by piece. Halfway up the path, I saw them, 10 men, all dressed in black suits, polished shoes glinting wet in the moonlight. They stood in a perfect circle around my father's headstone, not moving, not speaking, just there. Their formation was too deliberate to be grief, too controlled to be random. SUVs lined the access road like shadows with headlights off. I ducked behind a marble monument, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. What kind of memorial happens at 10 p.m. with bodyguards? One man stepped forward from the circle, tall, shoulders squared, the kind of presence that fills space without trying. I couldn't see his face, just his outline and the way the others deferred to him. He knelt, placed something white on the grave, and spoke in a low voice that carried foreign syllables. Italian, maybe, though softer, older. When he stood, he gestured once. All 10 men bowed their heads in unison. 30 seconds of silence. Then, as if on cue, they turned, filed into their vehicles, and drove off into the rain, engines humming like a secret being carried away. The hill went still again, just me and the whisper of the storm. I waited 5 whole minutes before I moved. The white object they'd left glowed faint under the lamplight. An envelope. Thick, expensive paper. My father's name written on it in precise, elegant script. Richard Brooks. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. Crisp, new, and a card, no bigger than my palm. 2 words, written in the same hand, debt paid, and beneath it, initials that would haunt me for nights to come. N.R. Don't move. The voice came from behind me, deep, calm, and much too close. I spun, nearly dropping the envelope. He stood less than 10 feet away, tall, built like someone who'd spent his life fighting things you couldn't see. His suit clung rain-slick to his frame, dark hair plastered against his forehead, eyes the kind of gray that doesn't exist in nature. I couldn't speak. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Neither should you. He stepped closer, the air between us tightening. You have his eyes. My breath caught. You knew my father? A pause. I did. His gaze flicked to the envelope in my hands. And you weren't supposed to find that. Then maybe you shouldn't leave expensive envelopes on a public grave, I shot back, fear sharpening into sarcasm. His jaw clenched, the first crack in his control. It's what I owed him. Owed him for what? He met my eyes, and for a second, the rain, the night, the years all fell away. For saving my life. That was the moment I should have run. Instead, I said the one thing that would change everything. Then tell me the truth. He hesitated, just long enough for thunder to roll in the distance, then reached into his jacket. I flinched. He didn't draw a weapon. He handed me a card. Plain white, embossed lettering. Nicholas Romano, Import and Export, 45 Ashbourne Plaza, downtown Portland. When you're ready to know what really happened to your father, he said softly, come find me. And why would I trust a stranger who shows up at a cemetery at night with a bag of money? You shouldn't, he said simply. But you will. Why? Because you're a journalist, Ms. Brooks, and you've been searching for this truth for 13 years. You won't stop now. My pulse went cold. How do you know who I am? He half smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I know everything that matters. Then he turned, walking toward the last SUV I hadn't noticed parked behind the oak. He paused before getting in. The men who killed your father are still out there, he said, and they know you're looking. The door slammed shut. The car disappeared into the night, taillights fading like dying embers. And I stood there under the rain, an envelope of blood money in my hands and a business card from a man whose initials matched the note N.R. Nicholas Romano, the Mafia boss who just told me my father died for something bigger than I could imagine. And somehow, impossibly, I knew one thing. I was going to walk into that man's office. Soon, because he was right. I wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. 2 days. That's how long I stared at that business card. It sat on my kitchen counter next to the envelope of money I refused to touch again. Every time I walked by, I told myself it was a bad idea, that nothing good ever comes from chasing ghosts. But ghosts have a way of whispering louder when you try to ignore them. By the third morning, I'd memorized his name, Nicholas Romano, a name that sounded like power, danger, and something I couldn't quite explain. So I did what I do best. I started digging. His name appeared in only a few old newspaper articles, charity galas, foundation fundraisers, business openings, never in the spotlight, always careful. But the tone of those articles, the way reporters wrote around him, it felt deliberate, like everyone was afraid to say too much. His company, Romano Imports, had offices in 6 cities and a website so vague it could have been selling anything from wine to weapons. When I told my best friend Imani Reed, she stared at me like I'd just confessed to swimming with sharks. You're not serious, she said, standing in my kitchen doorway with her coffee half finished. Selena, this man could be dangerous. You said it yourself. 10 men in black suits at a graveyard? That's not a book club. I know what I saw, I said. And he knew things about my father no one else could. Then go to the police, go to the FBI, go to somebody who doesn't have a private army. I shook my head. Imani, my father worked for the FBI. They called his death an accident and closed the case before I'd even finished crying. I can't trust them. She put her cup down hard on the counter. And you think trusting a mafia boss is better? The silence that followed said everything. Imani sighed, softening a little. You've spent 13 years chasing ghosts, girl. Don't let one drag you under. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'm not chasing a ghost this time. I'm chasing the truth. 48 hours later, I found myself standing in the lobby of a building that smelled like old money and quiet threats. Marble floors, gold trim, a receptionist with eyes too sharp for her polite smile. She made one call after I gave her my name, then pointed toward the elevator. "Top floor, Ms. Brooks. He's expecting you." My heart skipped a beat. He was expecting me. When the doors opened, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Expensive silence. Then I saw him. Nicholas Romano sat behind a dark wooden desk, sunlight glinting off the glass walls behind him. He looked different in daylight, less ghost, more man, but the air around him still carried that quiet command that made people listen even when he wasn't speaking. "Ms. Brooks," he said, standing. I wondered how long it would take. I hesitated at the doorway. I don't remember agreeing to anything. He motioned to the chair across from his. "You wouldn't be here if you didn't want answers." He wasn't wrong. I sat, keeping my back straight. "You said you knew who killed my father." "I do." He folded his hands on the desk. "But before I tell you that, I need to know what you already know." He was an FBI forensic accountant. He tracked money for a living. And before he died, his notes mentioned human trafficking, offshore accounts, political connections. He was close to something big. Nicholas nodded slowly, watching me the way a chess player studies the board. "Your father was building a case that would have exposed people in very high places. Senators, CEOs, law enforcement, all tied to one man." He opened a folder and slid it across the desk toward me. Dragan Vukovic. The name looked familiar. My father had written it dozens of times in his old notebooks. "He's the reason your father's dead," Nicholas said quietly. "An Albanian trafficker with political protection and more money than decency. When your father got close to the truth, they made it look like an accident." My chest tightened. "And you know this? How?" "Because I used to work for him." The room went still. Nicholas leaned back in his chair. 15 years ago, I was part of the Romano family business. My grandfather built an empire that hid its sins behind charity galas and shipping manifests. I was young and too proud to see the blood under it. Your father was the agent investigating us. He had everything: evidence, testimony, my name on half a dozen documents. "Then why didn't he arrest you?" I asked. He looked down, a rare flicker of emotion crossing his face. "Because he gave me a choice. Walk away and build something clean, or face prison. I chose to walk." "And you expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect anything," he said. "But I owe him my life, and when he was killed, I started looking into it myself." He opened another file. Photos, witness statements, financial records. I saw names that matched my father's old notes. I saw the place he'd died circled in red ink. "Your father was about to expose a trafficking network tied directly to Vukovic," Nicholas said. "Politicians, police, judges, they were all on the payroll. The night he died, he was trying to meet with someone he thought he could trust." I swallowed hard. "Someone like you." He didn't deny it. For a moment, we just sat there. Two people bound by a man who died trying to protect a truth bigger than both of us. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked. "Nothing," he said. "I promised your father I'd protect something if anything ever happened to him. I didn't understand what he meant until I saw you at that cemetery." "Protect me?" I whispered. He nodded once. "Dragan knows you've been digging. He knows you're his last loose end." Cold crept up my spine. "How could he possibly?" "Because his people monitor every request tied to that case. When you pulled those police records 3 months ago, you tripped an alarm." My stomach dropped. "Then why warn me?" He stood, his presence filling the room again. "Because I couldn't let your father's daughter die for the same truth he did." I stared at him, searching his eyes for any hint of a lie. There wasn't one. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need protection. Stay under my security for 72 hours while I handle this." "Handle it how?" "You don't want those details. I'm a journalist. Details are all I care about." "Then care about staying alive long enough to write them." I wanted to argue. I really did. But the seriousness in his voice told me this wasn't a suggestion. He extended a hand toward me. 3 days, Selena. That's all I ask. After that, you'll have your truth." The city lights shimmered behind him like a warning, and despite every rational thought in my head, I found myself nodding. If someone told you your parents' death was a cover-up, and that the person offering protection might be part of the same world that killed them, would you take their hand or walk away? Tell me what you'd do. The elevator doors closed behind me, and the quiet of Nicholas Romano's office disappeared into the noise of downtown Portland. For the first time since that night at the cemetery, I felt something sharp in my chest. Fear dressed up as adrenaline. I just agreed to spend 72 hours under protection from a man who once worked for the people who killed my father. That wasn't bravery. That was desperation wearing lipstick. I made it to the parking garage before the first chill crawled up my spine. Something felt off. The air was too still, too quiet for an underground level that usually hummed with tires and engines. My steps echoed between the concrete pillars. My car sat alone at the far end, headlights catching drips of rain from the ceiling. Then I saw them. 2 men, both in dark coats, standing just beyond the line of shadow. They weren't moving, just watching me. A pulse of dread hit so hard I almost dropped my keys. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound normal, casual. "Can I help you?" Neither answered. They started walking, fast. My feet reacted before my brain did. I turned, sprinting back toward the elevator. My heels clattered loud against the concrete. One of them shouted something in a language I didn't understand. The elevator doors opened, but instead of an empty car, a man in a black suit stepped out, gun drawn. "Down!" he barked. I froze. It wasn't one of them. It was one of his. A split second later, 2 more men appeared behind him. They grabbed my arms and pulled me behind a pillar just as gunfire cracked through the garage. The sound was deafening. Sparks lit the floor near my car as bullets ricocheted off metal. "Stay low," one of them ordered. I did. The firefight lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then silence. When I finally looked up, the 2 men who'd been waiting for me were on the ground. Alive, maybe, maybe not. The man who'd pulled me to cover pressed a finger to his earpiece. "Target secure. Bring the boss." 30 seconds later, Nicholas Romano himself walked through the smoke. Not a hair out of place. No fear in his eyes. He looked at the bodies, then at me. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, still half crouched behind the concrete barrier. He exhaled once, more relief than sound. "They were waiting by your car. Albanian. Dragon's people." How did you know?" "I didn't," he said quietly. "I just guessed you wouldn't listen to me." I wanted to snap at him, to tell him he sounded smug, but my throat was too tight. "What now?" I whispered. "Now," he said. "You come with me before the police arrive. They'll never be able to protect you from what's coming." He offered his hand. I hesitated only a second before taking it. The black SUV smelled like leather and cold rain. The man driving introduced himself as Lucas Trent, Nicholas's head of security. He had a calmness that only came from too many battles survived. Nicholas sat beside me, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and sharp in Italian. Orders, directions, something about a safe house north of the city. When he hung up, he looked over at me. "You see now why I said 72 hours?" I stared out the window, city lights streaking by. "I saw people try to kill me, yes. I still don't know why." "You were your father's daughter," he said, "and you've been asking the wrong questions for too long. Then start giving me the right answers." He studied me for a moment, that unreadable calm again, then said quietly, "First, we keep you alive. Then we'll talk about the truth." The safe house was 2 hours north, carved into the side of a mountain, like it belonged to someone who didn't trust anyone. Glass, stone, and shadows. Security cameras tucked into corners. Lucas showed me to a guest room that had furniture nicer than my entire apartment. He told me not to wander and left me alone. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the men in the garage, the muzzle flashes, the way Nicholas had walked through the chaos like he'd seen it 1,000 times before. The next morning, he came back. No suit jacket this time, just a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up. He carried a thermos and 2 cups. "Coffee?" I nodded, surprised at how normal the question felt in a place like this. He poured and slid one toward me. "I promised you answers," he said. "Let's start with what your father died for." He pulled a leather bag onto the table, unzipped it, and spread files across the surface. Financial records, coded documents, photos, some old, some recent. Each page was another piece of the story he'd started to tell. "Your father uncovered a network that sold people like cargo," Nicholas said. He traced the money, found the names. He was weeks away from exposing them when they made sure he never did. I touched one of the photos. My father in an unmarked car, camera in hand. I hadn't seen his face like that in years. Focused, alive, chasing something he believed in. Nicholas's voice softened. He was a good man, better than most I've met. He believed people could change. I looked up at him. And have you? He held my gaze. I'm trying. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the glass like memory. Inside, the silence stretched between us. Too long, too heavy, and somewhere in that silence, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of what he was waking up inside me. Curiosity, trust, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. I don't know what surprised me more, the fact that I was still alive, or the fact that I'd stopped trying to convince myself Nicholas Romano was the villain. For 2 days, I lived in that mountain house like a guest who didn't know where to put her hands. Every sound made me jump. Every knock on my door made my heart race. But Nicholas was always calm. Too calm. He moved through the house like someone who'd lived 1,000 lives and was tired of all of them. Every time I asked about my father's investigation, he said, "Soon." Soon became tomorrow. Tomorrow became after I handle something. By the third night, my patience was running on fumes. I found him in the study, sleeves rolled up again. Phone pressed to his ear, speaking in Italian. His tone was sharp, controlled. When he ended the call, he looked up and froze like he hadn't expected to see me there. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked. "Long enough to know you don't sleep," I said. He smiled faintly. "Insomnia and guilt make terrible roommates." "Try grief," I said softly. "It's louder." Something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but understanding. He set his phone down and nodded toward the files on the table. "Do you want to know what your father found?" I swallowed. "That's why I'm here." He opened a folder, revealing a series of coded transactions. Lines of numbers, dates, offshore accounts. "This is what your father was tracing," Nicholas said. "Payments that disappeared through shell companies. The kind that move people like property." I frowned. "But these aren't just random accounts. Look," I pointed at a familiar name buried in the numbers. "Senator Royce. He's on the finance committee." Nicholas nodded. "Your father found that too. That's why they silenced him." My pulse quickened. "You're saying a U.S. senator is part of a trafficking ring?" "I'm saying men with power rarely get their hands dirty. They pay others to do it." He handed me another file. Photos of warehouses, shipping containers, faces blurred out. My father's handwriting was scrawled across the top. "They're not importing goods. They're importing souls." My throat closed up. I touched the page as if I could feel him there, still chasing the truth that got him killed. Nicholas watched me quietly. He was close to shutting it down. Too close. "Then why didn't you go to the police?" "I did. They buried it." His words were calm, but there was a coldness under them. A bitterness that came from knowing justice was a luxury. I looked at him carefully. "You said you worked for this man, Dragan. Why not kill him yourself?" Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Because revenge isn't the same as justice." That sounds rehearsed. He met my eyes. "Maybe it is. I've been repeating it long enough to start believing it." I don't know what it was about that moment. Maybe the way his voice dropped, or the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. But the air between us changed. It wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about two people who had both lost too much and didn't know what to do with what was left. The rain outside turned heavy, blurring the mountains into streaks of gray. Nicholas poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one. "To your father," he said quietly. I raised my glass. "To the truth." We drank in silence. Later that night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about those files, those names, about the way Nicholas had said they buried it. It meant he'd tried once before and failed, and that scared me. Around 2 a.m., I got up and wandered into the study. The lamp on the desk was still on, casting a warm circle of light over scattered papers. Nicholas wasn't there. I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I started flipping through the files he'd left open. That's when I saw it. A black and white photo of my father shaking hands with Nicholas, both smiling, both looking like they trusted each other. But what caught my breath was the date printed in the corner, 2 days before my father died. Looking for something? I jumped. Nicholas stood in the doorway barefoot, hair slightly messy, expression unreadable. I couldn't sleep, I said quickly. You left this out. He walked over slowly, stopping close enough for me to feel the heat of him. I told you, Selena. The truth can't be rushed. Then why were you with my father 2 days before he died? His jaw tensed. Because he asked to meet. About what? Protection. He knew someone inside the bureau had betrayed him. He wanted me to keep his family safe if anything happened. I stepped back. And yet, he still died. Pain flickered in his eyes. I wasn't fast enough. The room went quiet again, just the sound of rain hitting glass. He took a deep breath. I've spent 13 years trying to make that right. And now? Now I'm trying to keep his daughter alive. He looked at me for a long moment, something raw passing through his expression. Regret, maybe, or something heavier. I looked away first, but he didn't move. You remind me of him, he said finally. Same fire, same refusal to back down. Maybe that's why people keep trying to kill me. Or maybe, he said softly, that's why I can't walk away. Something inside me shifted. I didn't trust him completely, but I didn't doubt his sincerity either, and that was dangerous. He turned toward the window. Dragan won't stop. He's already lost too much to let this go quietly. He'll come for you. Then we hit him first, I said before I could think. He turned back, eyes narrowing slightly. What did you say? You heard me. If my father spent years chasing this man, then I'm finishing what he started. Nicholas stared at me for a long time, then let out a quiet, humorless laugh. You really are your father's daughter. I take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one, he said, but there was a faint smile hiding behind the words. The next morning, Lucas returned with updates, coded chatter from Dragon's network, movement in Seattle, and a name that made Nicholas's eyes darken, Senator Royce. He's holding a private fundraiser tomorrow night, Lucas said. Dragon's people might use it as cover to move their next shipment. Nicholas turned to me. You wanted to help? This is your chance. I blinked. You're taking me to a fundraiser run by a corrupt senator and a human trafficker? He shrugged. You said you wanted to finish your father's work. That means getting close to the people who killed him. I hesitated, then nodded. If my father had risked everything to stop these men, I couldn't hide behind fear. Not anymore. That night, I stood in front of a mirror in the guest room, wearing the only dress Nicholas's assistant had managed to bring. Black, simple, and far too elegant for someone who hadn't slept in days. When Nicholas saw me, something in his expression softened. You clean up well, he said, his voice low. So do you, I replied, eyeing his tuxedo. For a moment, it almost felt like we were normal people, two strangers going to a party. But then his expression changed, serious again. If anything goes wrong tonight, you stay close to me. No heroics. I smiled faintly. You say that like I'm the one with the gun. He didn't smile back. Just promise me. Selena, I promise. The drive into the city was quiet. Lights flickered on wet streets, and thunder rolled somewhere far off. I stared out the window, thinking about how much had changed in just a few days. My life before Nicholas felt like another lifetime. Now I was heading into a lion's den with a man I barely knew, one who might be my only chance at survival, or my biggest mistake. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that every step was leading me exactly where I was meant to be. The ballroom shimmered like a lie. Chandeliers, champagne, laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Money has a sound. It's not paper or coins. It's the way people speak when they think they're untouchable. Nicholas walked beside me, one hand at my back, guiding me through the crowd like he'd done this 100 times before, probably because he had. To everyone else, he was just another wealthy businessman with a beautiful date. To me, he was a ticking secret wrapped in a tuxedo. Smile, he murmured under his breath. You look like you're here to assassinate someone. I glanced up at him. Maybe I am. His mouth curved, just barely. Not tonight, Ms. Brooks. He leaned close enough that I could feel the warmth of his voice against my ear. Stay calm. Eyes on me. No matter what happens, don't draw attention. That was easy for him to say. He looked like control in human form. I looked like an exposed nerve trying not to tremble. The senator's fundraiser buzzed with the kind of self-importance that could light a city. Reporters, lobbyists, donors, all sipping champagne and pretending they weren't funding corruption. I spotted Senator Royce near the stage, smiling that too-perfect smile politicians practice in mirrors. Nicholas's body language shifted, subtle but sharp. He was watching every movement in the room, every glance. I realized then that he wasn't just protecting me. He was hunting. Your father was supposed to meet Royce the night before he died, Nicholas said quietly. He thought Royce could help bring Vukovich down. He didn't realize Royce was already paid. I felt my stomach twist. Paid how? By silence, the same kind that kills truth. Before I could reply, a voice behind us said smoothly, Nicholas Romano, I thought the rumors were exaggerated. We turned. Senator Royce himself stood there, glass in hand, that fake smile still in place. Senator, Nicholas said evenly, you look well. Better than the last time we spoke. You remember that night, don't you? Your family's charity gala. Before things got complicated. Royce's tone was friendly, but his eyes were knives. Nicholas smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. Complicated is one word for it. Royce's gaze slid to me. And who's your lovely guest? This is Selena Brooks, Nicholas said before I could speak. A journalist. She's writing a piece on philanthropic influence in politics. It was a lie so smooth I almost believed it myself. Royce's smile faltered for just a second, long enough for me to know he recognized my last name. Brooks, he repeated slowly. That's familiar, I met his gaze. My father worked in federal finance. You may have crossed paths. Oh yes, Royce said softly. Tragic what happened to him. Accidents are so unpredictable. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. He was taunting me, daring me to react. Nicholas must have sensed it, because he stepped slightly in front of me, shifting his body between us. Excuse us, Senator, he said politely. We have other guests to greet. Royce's smile didn't fade. Of course. Enjoy the evening. And Ms. Brooks, it was a pleasure meeting you. Your father was a fascinating man. The words followed me like ghosts as Nicholas guided me away. We moved toward a quieter corner near the balcony, the city lights spreading out below like another universe. He knew, I whispered. He knew my father. Nicholas nodded grimly. He did. And now he knows you're here. Then why bring me? Because now he'll panic. And men like Royce make mistakes when they panic. He handed me a small device, no bigger than a lipstick. Recorder. Keep it close. When he slips, we'll have proof. You think he'll talk? He already did, Nicholas said. He just doesn't know it yet. An hour later, I excused myself to the restroom to clear my head. I splashed water on my face and stared into the mirror. What was I doing here? I was a journalist, not an undercover agent. Somewhere between my father's grave and this ballroom, I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. When I stepped back into the hallway, I saw something that stopped me cold. Nicholas, talking to a man I didn't recognize, tall, bald, with a scar running down his cheek. They spoke low and fast. The stranger handed Nicholas a folder, then walked away. I couldn't hear what they said, but Nicholas's expression told me everything. Anger, frustration, maybe guilt. He turned and saw me watching. Selena, he said, walking toward me. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He hesitated, and that pause said more than any lie could. You're hiding something, I said quietly. Before he could answer, a sudden explosion of glass shattered the air. Screams, chaos. A gunshot ripped through the ballroom. Nicholas grabbed my arm and pulled me down behind a table. Stay down! People scattered. Bodyguards shouted into earpieces. The chandelier above the dance floor swung violently. I peeked over the table edge. A man near the entrance with a rifle, shouting in another language. Security swarmed him, but not fast enough. Nicholas reached inside his jacket, and this time, he did pull a gun. He moved like lightning. 2 shots. The gunman dropped, But before I could catch my breath, a second shooter appeared on the balcony. Nicholas turned. Too late. A shot rang out. He stumbled, grabbing his shoulder. I screamed his name and lunged forward, helping him down behind the table. "Nick! I'm fine!" he hissed through clenched teeth. "Stay low!" Blood soaked through his sleeve. I tore a napkin from the table and pressed it against the wound. He didn't flinch. Within seconds, more security flooded the room. The gunfire stopped. Sirens in the distance. Nicholas gripped my wrist, voice hoarse. "We have to go! Now! Nick, you're hurt! I've been worse! Move!" We slipped through a side exit into the cold night air. Headlights flashing as his men pulled up in another SUV. Lucas jumped out, covering us with his weapon. "2 shooters dead," he said quickly. "No ID yet." Nicholas winced as he climbed in. "They weren't after Royce. They were after her." My stomach dropped. "Me? Why?" "Because Dragon knows you're digging, and because he's losing control." Lucas looked at him. "We need to get you both out of here before the feds show up." Nicholas nodded, pain flickering behind his eyes. "Take us to the warehouse." "The what?" I asked. He looked at me, blood on his sleeve, voice steady. "The place where your father died." The warehouse was on the edge of the river, abandoned, cold, echoing with old ghosts. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen it in the crime scene photos all those years ago. Nicholas's men spread out, flashlights cutting through the dark. He leaned against a crate, breathing hard. I wanted to yell at him for getting shot, for bringing me here, for not telling me the truth. But all I could do was watch him and realize how human he looked when he was hurting. "This is where it happened," he said finally. "Your father met his contact here, but it wasn't me." "Then who was it?" He opened his phone and showed me a photo. A man in a suit shaking hands with Senator Royce. "That's the man who betrayed your father," Nicholas said. "An undercover agent on Royce's payroll. He tipped them off. Your father never had a chance." I stared at the photo, my throat burning. "Then why did you take the blame? Why let me think you were part of it?" He met my eyes, and for the first time his voice broke. "Because I should have been there. I promised your father I'd protect him. I failed, so I paid his debts every year since, at his grave, until the night you showed up." The truth hit like lightning. He hadn't been part of my father's death. He'd been carrying the guilt for it. I felt tears sting my eyes. "Nick!" He stepped closer, eyes dark with something I didn't want to name. "I told myself I wouldn't let anyone close again. But you?" He stopped, shaking his head. "You ruined my logic." I laughed through the tears. "You ruined mine." For a long, breathless moment, neither of us moved. The rain started again, soft, cold, and endless. And when he reached up and brushed the tear from my cheek, I didn't stop him. But peace never lasts long in a world built on lies. Because just as I opened my mouth to speak, Lucas's voice came through the radio, sharp, panicked. "They found us. 2 SUVs inbound. Heavy weapons." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Get her out of here." "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "Not without you." He looked at me, really looked, and for a second I saw fear there. Not for himself, for me. "Selena," he said, voice low and final. "If you stay, you die. Please." And before I could answer, he shoved me toward Lucas and shouted, "Go!" Gunfire erupted outside. Sparks, screams, and the sound of Nicholas Romano stepping into the storm to keep his promise to a man long gone. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember the screaming tires, or the rain blurring the world into streaks of gray and red. I just remember his voice, Nicholas shouting for me to go, echoing over the sound of gunfire, and then silence, cold, heavy silence. When I finally looked back, the warehouse was gone. All I saw was smoke curling into the night sky. Lucas drove like a man possessed, one hand gripping the wheel, the other pressing a radio against his ear. No response, no updates, nothing from Nicholas. "Say something," I whispered. Lucas didn't look at me. "He told me to get you out." "I didn't ask what he told you. I asked where he is." He hesitated, jaw tightening. "The last transmission said they had him surrounded." The words hit like a bullet I didn't see coming. Surrounded. I turned toward the window, forcing my breath to steady. If I broke now, I'd never pull myself back together. He's not dead, I said quietly, more to myself than to Lucas. He can't be. Lucas didn't answer. He didn't have to. We stopped at a safe house an hour outside the city, a cabin hidden in the woods, quiet enough that even grief sounded too loud. Lucas checked the perimeter, then turned to me. "You'll be safe here," I laughed, a short, broken sound. "You really think safety means anything right now?" He looked at me for a long second, then said, "Romano trusted you. Don't make that mean nothing." Before I could reply, he was gone, out into the rain, leaving me with my shaking hands and the echo of a man I might never see again. That night, the walls felt too close. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like a memory trying to drag me back to the cemetery, to that envelope, to the moment this all began. I tried to distract myself, flipped through the files Nicholas had left in the SUV, notes in his handwriting, diagrams, lists of names, but the more I read, the less sense it made. There was something missing. Something he hadn't told me. A page near the back caught my eye. A single sentence, scrawled in bold ink. If she's reading this, I failed. My chest tightened. Below it, coordinates, latitude, longitude, somewhere in the city. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed the car keys, a flashlight, and the gun Nicholas had left under the seat. I'd never fired one before, but fear makes you learn fast. If those coordinates were what I thought they were, a safe drop, a clue, a plan, then sitting here wasn't safety. It was surrender, and I wasn't done yet. The city was still wet when I pulled onto the empty street an hour later. The coordinates led to an old auto repair shop on the east side, half collapsed, windows boarded, forgotten by everyone except the kind of people who needed places to hide. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, flashlight tucked under my coat. Rain slicked the pavement. Every sound seemed amplified. Dripping water, distant sirens, my heartbeat. The front door was locked, but the side gate wasn't. I slipped through and found a small office at the back. Inside was a mess of old tools, boxes, and a flickering lamp that shouldn't have been on. And then I saw it. A metal case lying open on the desk. Inside, files, cash, passports, one with Nicholas's photo. My hands shook as I flipped through it. Notes about the investigation, photos of Senator Royce, and one more thing, a sealed envelope marked Selena Brooks. I tore it open. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise. There's a hard drive hidden behind the 3rd brick from the left under the window. It's everything your father died for. Get it to someone who still believes in justice. And Selena, I meant what I said. Some debts can never be repaid. Only protected. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. His handwriting carried more weight than any name could. I found the loose brick, pried it open, and pulled out a small drive wrapped in plastic. It was real. It was proof. And that's when I heard it, the soft click of a gun behind me. "Put it down." The voice was cold, familiar. I turned slowly. Senator Royce stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, gun steady in his hand. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, almost amused. "Romano always had a weakness for sentiment. I knew he'd lead me right to you." I took a step back. "Where is he?" Royce smiled. "Alive, for now. Dragon doesn't kill his bargaining chips too quickly." My chest ached. "You set him up." "I set both of you up," he said. "The moment you walked into that fundraiser, you gave me everything I needed. Your face, your name, your connection to your father's files. It's poetic, really. He died chasing truth, and you'll die trying to finish his mistake." He raised the gun. And then, the sound of glass shattering. A single gunshot. Not his. Royce's expression froze. He dropped the weapon, clutching his arm. Behind him, a shadow moved. Fast, silent. Nicholas. Blood still stained his sleeve, but he was alive. And angry. He kicked the gun away, grabbed Royce by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. "You should have stayed in Washington," Nicholas growled. Royce coughed, gasping. "You can't stop it. You never could." "You think killing me changes anything?" Nicholas leaned in close. "No, but it buys us time." He punched him once, hard enough to drop him, then turned to me. "You shouldn't be here." "I followed your trail," I said, shaking. "You left me no choice." He looked at the drive in my hand, then back at me. "You found it." "I did." He nodded once. "Good, because it's not just Royce. Dragon's on his way. He wants that drive, and he'll burn the city to get it." We didn't have time to run. Nicholas grabbed a small detonator from his pocket and tossed it at the wall. Explosives blinked red along the foundation. "What is that?" I asked. "Insurance," he said. "Royce's files are backed up somewhere safe. This place won't be. Nick, if you blow this building, we're already dead if we don't." Sirens wailed in the distance. Engines. Black SUVs. Again. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back exit. "Come on!" We ran through the rain, across the alley, into the dark, just as the explosion ripped through the building behind us. Heat. Smoke. Debris raining down like ash. I stumbled, coughing, gripping his hand so tightly it hurt. He turned to me, breathing hard, eyes wild in the firelight. "Selena," he said, voice rough, "if we don't make it out of this, you take that drive and finish what your father started. Promise me. I'm not leaving you again. Promise me." I shook my head. "No, not this time." He exhaled, a small, broken sound, and pulled me close. For the first time, I didn't resist. The world burned around us, but all I felt was the steady beat of his heart against mine. "We'll finish it together," I whispered. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, eyes closing briefly like he was memorizing the moment. When the fire trucks finally arrived, we were gone, lost somewhere between the forest road and the truth. Nicholas's wound reopened, but he refused to stop driving. Blood on his shirt, fire in his eyes. "Where are we going?" I asked softly. He looked straight ahead. "To end this." "End what?" He tightened his grip on the wheel. "The war your father started, and the one Dragon's about to finish." That night, as we crossed the bridge out of the city, I looked at the hard drive in my lap. So small, so powerful, proof of everything, proof of everyone. Enough to bring them all down. If we survived long enough to use it, and for the first time, I understood what my father must have felt. The cost of chasing the truth in a world built on lies. I looked at Nicholas, his profile lit by the faint orange glow of the city behind us. He'd lost blood, sleep, maybe even hope, but he kept going. Because he'd made a promise, and so had I. The drive felt endless. The city lights faded behind us until all that remained was darkness, rain, and the sound of the engine struggling against the storm. Nicholas's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He'd lost too much blood, but he refused to stop. "Nick," I said quietly, "you're not invincible." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Don't tell my enemies that. You need a doctor. I need you to trust me for a few more hours." "I do," I said softly. "That's why I'm still here." He glanced at me, and for a second the mask slipped. Just enough to show the exhaustion, the pain, and the flicker of something tender underneath it all. "Your father said the same thing once," he murmured. "The night we met. He told me trust was a currency most people can't afford." "And you believed him?" "I didn't. Until now." We reached the coast just before dawn. A small marina appeared out of the fog. Boats swaying like tired ghosts. Nicholas parked near an old boathouse and exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "This is it," he said. "The end of the line." "What's here?" He turned to me, eyes steady. "The truth, or at least the part of it we can still save." He climbed out of the SUV, moving slower now, but still steady. I followed him into the boathouse. Damp wood, the smell of salt and gasoline. In the corner was a rusted safe, half hidden behind fishing nets. Nicholas knelt, pressed a code into the keypad, and the lock clicked open. Inside, a single black laptop and another envelope. He handed me the envelope. "Your father made this backup before he died. I've kept it hidden all these years." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos, names, handwritten notes, my father's voice frozen in ink. Then Nicholas opened the laptop and slid in the drive I'd found. The screen flickered. Files loaded, dozens of them. Videos, audio recordings, bank transactions. He clicked on the first file. My father's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, it means they found me. Don't believe the accident, it wasn't one. I was close, too close. The man funding all of this isn't Dragon, he's the cover. The real power sits in Washington. I felt tears burn at the edges of my eyes. Hearing him again was like being pulled back in time. The steady tone, the calm urgency. Nicholas Romano can be trusted, my father's voice continued. He's risked everything to keep the evidence safe. If anything happens to me, find him. He'll know what to do. My breath caught. He'd said his name. My father had trusted him. I looked up at Nicholas, but he didn't meet my eyes. He just stood there, jaw tight, staring at the screen like it was a ghost. The next recording played automatically. This one was darker, my father's tone lower, rushed. Royce has the bureau in his pocket. I've seen the accounts, the bribes. If this reaches anyone, the only safe hands are outside the law. God help whoever follows this trail, they'll be hunted like me. The file ended. Silence filled the room. Nicholas shut the laptop and finally looked at me. Now you know, I nodded slowly. You risked everything to protect this. He didn't answer. Why? I asked softly. You could have walked away. Started over. He leaned against the wall. Rain dripping from his hair. Because I owed him. And because when I saw you at that grave, I realized I was still trying to pay a debt that couldn't be paid. I took a slow breath. You don't owe me anything, Nick. His voice softened. Maybe not, but I want to. The waves crashed against the dock outside. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the small boathouse like a photograph. Him, bruised and bleeding, and me standing in the middle of a truth too big for either of us to carry alone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. I spent so long blaming you, I whispered, for everything I didn't understand. You had every right to. I was wrong. He looked at me then, really looked. And something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to it. The peace didn't last. Lucas's voice suddenly crackled through the radio in Nicholas's pocket. Boss, we've got movement. 3 SUVs coming from the north. They found us. Nicholas grabbed the laptop and shoved it into a duffel bag. We have to move, now! We ran out into the storm. The sky was black, the wind cutting through like glass. Engines roared somewhere beyond the hill. Nicholas handed me the bag. Get to the boat. I'll cover you. I shook my head. I'm not leaving you again. He gave a small, broken smile. You're just like him. Then trust me like you trusted him. He hesitated, just for a moment, then nodded. Fine, but if we don't make it, we will. We sprinted across the dock as headlights cut through the fog behind us. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Boards splintered. Lucas appeared out of nowhere. Weapon drawn, covering our path. Boats ready, he shouted. We jumped aboard, Nicholas firing back as bullets tore through the wooden rail. Lucas hit the throttle, and the boat lurched forward into open water. The city disappeared behind us, replaced by waves and chaos. Nick, you're bleeding again, I shouted over the wind. I'll live! I pressed my hand against his arm, trying to slow the blood. He winced, then looked at me, eyes fierce despite the pain. Selena, he said over the roar of the sea, you have to promise me something. No more promises. This one matters. He gripped my hand. If I don't make it, don't let this die with me. Don't let my mistakes bury your father's truth. The boat rocked hard as a bullet clipped the hull. Nick, stop talking like that. He smiled faintly. Then stay alive long enough to yell at me later. Lucas steered toward a narrow inlet between cliffs, but before we reached it, another boat appeared. Larger, darker, faster. Headlights flared through the mist. Dragon's men. They're gaining! Lucas shouted. Nicholas raised his gun, firing back, but his arm trembled from blood loss. I reached into the bag, pulled out a flare gun, and aimed it at the approaching boat. Selena, don't! I fired. The flare hit the bow, exploding in a burst of light and heat. The other boat swerved, crashing into a reef. We kept moving, waves slamming against us until the engines finally cut. Silence, only the sound of rain on metal. Nicholas collapsed against the railing, breathing hard, blood mixed with seawater at his feet. I knelt beside him. Nick, stay with me. He blinked slowly. You really shouldn't have done that. Saved your life? You're welcome. He managed a weak smile. You sound like him again. Don't compare me to my father, I said softly. I'm not. I'm saying he'd be proud. The words hit harder than any bullet. For the first time, I believed them. We drifted for what felt like hours before finding another small dock. Lucas radioed a contact for extraction, then gave us space. Nicholas sat quietly, staring out at the waves. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. I've lived my life cleaning up other people's sins. I thought if I paid enough debts, maybe I could erase mine. I looked at him. You can't erase them. You can only face them. He turned, meeting my eyes. And if I told you I don't know how? I reached over and took his hand. Then let's figure it out together. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The world was chaos outside that boathouse, but inside, it was quiet. And in that silence, something changed. I realized I wasn't chasing my father's ghost anymore. I was walking alongside the only man who'd ever dared to carry his promise. By the time the sun clawed its way over the horizon, the sky looked bruised, gray and purple fading into the thin orange line of morning. We hadn't slept. We couldn't. Lucas paced the small dock, radio crackling in bursts of static. Somewhere out there, Dragon's men were regrouping. The air smelled of salt and diesel and fear. Nicholas sat at the edge of the pier, one arm bandaged, his shirt torn, his face shadowed by fatigue. He looked like someone carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes. I sat beside him, clutching the hard drive in my jacket pocket. Every few seconds I'd glance at him, just to make sure he was still breathing right. You ever think about what happens after all this? I asked quietly. He didn't look at me. After? When it's over. When the truth's out. When there's no one left to fight. He let out a slow breath. People like me don't get after Selena. We get away, if we're lucky. I shook my head. That's not good enough. He turned then, eyes meeting mine. For people like you, it shouldn't be. The silence that followed said the rest. Lucas approached, voice low. The satellite feed picked something up. A cargo facility about 5 miles from here. Heavy movement. Looks like Vukovic's people. Nicholas stood. The exhaustion vanished from his posture. Purpose filled its place. That's him, he said. He's moving the shipments before we can leak the files. I felt my pulse quicken. Then that's where we end this. Lucas frowned. You're not going. She is, Nicholas said. She's the reason he's exposed it all. Lucas stared at him like he'd lost his mind. She's not trained. She's her father's daughter, Nicholas said evenly. She's earned the right to see this through. The drive to the facility was silent, except for the rain. The landscape blurred by. Empty fields, broken fences, abandoned warehouses. By the time we arrived, the world felt stripped down to metal and fear. Lucas killed the headlights and handed each of us an earpiece. Thermal scans show at least 20 men inside. Probably more. Vukovic's car's at the south entrance. Nicholas checked his weapon. We go in quiet. We get the server. We end it. What about Dragon? I asked. He looked at me. If we find him, I finish it. I met his gaze. No, we finish it. For a moment, he almost smiled. Then he nodded. We slipped inside through a side door. The building reeked of oil and rust, rows of shipping containers stacked like tombs. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the distance. Nicholas moved ahead, a shadow among shadows. Lucas took the flank. I stayed close behind, holding the small camera we'd rigged to upload whatever we found to a remote server. Every corner felt like a heartbeat waiting to stop. We found the main office upstairs, glass walls overlooking the warehouse floor, computers, a server rack humming quietly. Nicholas motioned for me to start. I plugged in the hard drive, heart pounding as the files began to upload. Progress bar, 10%. Outside, voices shouted in another language, 20%. The elevator at the far end dinged softly. Nicholas froze. He's here. Dragan Vukovic stepped out of the elevator flanked by 3 men. Tall, expensive suit, eyes like polished steel. He looked at Nicholas first, then at me. So this is the girl, he said in accented English. the one who digs graves that should stay closed. Funny, Nicholas said. You've been standing on one your whole life. Dragan smiled thinly. I respected your father once, Romano, until he betrayed the order. And now his little journalist thinks she can do better. He turned his gaze to me. Your father died because he trusted men who wear guilt like perfume. My hand tightened around the camera. No, I said. He died because of you. Dragan's smile didn't fade. Do you even know who signed his death order? Nicholas shifted beside me, gun raised. Don't listen to him. Dragan tilted his head, enjoying the tension. Tell her, Romano. Tell her who was there that night. Nicholas's jaw clenched. Don't. My stomach knotted. What is he talking about? Dragan's grin widened. You didn't tell her, did you? That the ambush wasn't random, that your father called for help, and Romano here arrived late on purpose. Nicholas's voice cut through the room. Enough! He made a deal, girl, Dragan said. A trade, your father's life for his own freedom. That's why you're both here now. Because of him. The words hit like a knife. I turned to Nicholas. Tell me he's lying. He didn't answer right away. His silence screamed louder than any confession. Nick, I whispered, tell me. He looked at me, eyes full of things he couldn't unsay. I was supposed to warn him, he said quietly, but by the time I got there, it was already over. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could protect you. My heart shattered somewhere between one breath and the next. You lied to me. I protected you. You protected yourself. Dragan laughed, low and cruel. Ah, love and lies. The oldest dance. Nicholas's gun fired before the laugh finished. The bullet tore through Dragan's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. His guards opened fire. Glass shattered. I dove behind the desk as bullets sprayed across the room. Nicholas dragged me down, covering me with his body. Lucas fired from the stairwell, taking out 2 men before a shot caught him in the side. Nicholas! I shouted. He's hit! Nicholas rose, eyes dark with fury. Get to the server! I crawled to the computer. 68%, 74%, while the room erupted in chaos. Another bullet hit the monitor. Sparks flew. I yanked the drive free and shoved it into my pocket. Dragan lunged toward me, blood soaking his sleeve. Nicholas fired again. Missed. Dragan slammed into him, both of them crashing through the glass railing onto the floor below. I screamed his name and ran down the stairs. When I reached them, both men were on their feet. Barely. Dragan swung a metal rod. Nicholas dodged, countered with a brutal strike to the ribs. You can't stop what's coming, Dragan spat. Nicholas's voice was a growl. Watch me! They struggled, slipping in blood and rain leaking from the broken roof. Dragan's gun skidded across the floor, right to my feet. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Nicholas on one knee, Dragan raising the rod for the final blow. I didn't think. I aimed. And fired. The sound was deafening. Dragan fell back, eyes wide, shock frozen on his face, then stillness. Nicholas looked up at me, chest heaving, eyes full of something between grief and relief. You shouldn't have had to do that, he said. I had to, I whispered. For him. For you. He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a breath that sounded like release. Sirens wailed in the distance again, closer this time. Lucas stumbled toward us, hand pressed to his side. We need to go. Now. Nicholas glanced at Dragan's body, then at me. Is the drive safe? I pulled it from my pocket. It's everything. He nodded. Then we've won. I shook my head. Not yet. The world still has to see it. He managed a faint smile. That's your part. What about you? I disappear. People like me don't get medals. I stepped closer, anger and heartbreak colliding. You're not disappearing again. Not after this. He looked at me, eyes soft. Selena. The sound of approaching vehicles cut him off. Federal cars, dozens of them. Lucas cursed under his breath. Royce's replacements. If they find us, they'll bury this too. I looked at the drive, then at Nicholas. Then we make sure they can't. We ran to the roof access ladder and climbed. Wind howled, rain slicing sideways. From up there, I could see the city, a blur of light and storm. Nicholas pulled a small satellite transmitter from his jacket. We can upload the files from here. Once they're live, no one can hide. I connected the drive, fingers trembling. Progress bar, uploading data. Lights flared below as black SUVs surrounded the building. Faster, Lucas muttered, aiming his rifle over the edge. 90%. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the roof. Nicholas shielded me, firing back with his remaining rounds. 95%. A bullet hit the transmitter. Sparks burst. No! I screamed. Nicholas yanked the drive free and shoved it into my hand. Backup channel! Your phone! I connected it. Blood, rain, and tears blurring together. The screen flashed. Upload complete. The moment the signal confirmed, Nicholas dropped the transmitter, shoulders sagging with relief. It's done, he said. The world knows. Below us, sirens changed tone. Panic, confusion. They'd seen the broadcast. News networks picking it up in real time. The truth, my father's truth, was free. Nicholas turned toward me, rain running down his face like tears he'd never admit to. You did it, he whispered. He'd be proud. So would you, I said. He smiled faintly. Maybe this is my after all. Before I could answer, another shot rang out. He staggered. Nick! I caught him as he fell, the world tilting around us. Lucas fired back, dropping the last attacker, then rushed to help. But Nicholas's blood was already soaking through my hands. Stay with me, I begged. He looked at me, eyes glassy but still full of that impossible calm. Looks like I kept my promise after all. Don't you dare, I whispered, choking on tears. Don't you leave me. He smiled, weak but real. I'm not leaving, just finally resting. And then, with the faintest breath, tell your father. Debt paid. His hand went still in mine. For a long time I couldn't move. The rain fell harder, washing away the blood, the lies, the years. Below us, the world was changing. Sirens, shouting, truth spreading faster than bullets ever could. Lucas put a hand on my shoulder. He did it, Selena. You both did. I nodded, though my throat couldn't form words. Then I looked out at the dawn breaking through the storm clouds and whispered, You kept your promise, Nick. Now I'll keep mine. The rain finally stopped an hour after sunrise. The sky turned the color of faded steel, quiet after the storm, the way a church feels when the choir has gone home. Paramedics arrived first, then local police, then the press, drawn by the same broadcast that had just set the city on fire. Reporters shouted questions through the barricades, cameras flashed. Somewhere in the chaos, someone was already calling it the Romano leaks. Lucas stayed beside me while they covered Nicholas's body with a white sheet. He hadn't said a word since. He didn't need to. Every breath between us was grief. A young officer walked over. Ms. Brooks, the FBI wants a statement. I looked past him to the horizon. Gray water, a smear of dawn. The FBI had 13 years to listen, I said quietly. They can wait a few more hours. They took Nicholas away before I could say goodbye properly. No ceremony, no flag, just a stretcher rolling into the back of a van that drove off into the mist. When the doors closed, something in me closed too. Not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after truth finally shouts itself hoarse. 3 days later, the world exploded. The files hit every major network. Names, accounts, transactions, recordings. The whole rotten system stripped bare. Senator Royce was arrested. Half the finance committee resigned. And the press, the same people who once ignored my father's warnings, couldn't get enough of the story now. They called me the daughter who finished the fight. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Victory, it turned out, was just another kind of grief. At my father's grave, the wind carried the smell of wet earth and salt from the river below. The new headstone gleamed in the light. Richard Brooks, a man who chose truth over silence. I knelt and placed 2 things at the base of the stone, his old notebook and a single white rose. Then I whispered, It's over, Dad. You can rest now. The breeze rustled through the trees like an answer. For the first time, I believed it. The weeks that followed were strange. I gave testimony. I met agents who suddenly wanted to help. I sat on talk shows where people asked about courage and justice, as if those things were neat little packages you could hold up for the camera. They didn't ask about Nicholas. Most of them didn't even know his name. The government called him a confidential source. That was all the recognition he'd ever get. But I knew better. He wasn't a source. He was the bridge between guilt and redemption, and he'd burned himself to light the way. Late one evening, I got a call from Lucas. They buried him privately, he said. No headstone, no name. My throat tightened. Where? Up near the coast. Old St. Mary's Cemetery. The kind of place he'd have liked. Quiet, facing the sea. I drove there the next morning. The gate creaked open to rows of worn stones and wildflowers pushing through the cracks. It was beautiful in that lonely, forgotten way. Lucas was waiting near a small, unmarked grave. He didn't speak. He just nodded toward it and walked away, giving me space. I stood there a long time, unsure what to say to someone who'd already said everything with his actions. Finally, I took off the silver chain around my neck, my father's badge tag, bent and scratched from years of hiding, and set it on the grave. Debt paid, I whispered, and promise kept. The wind off the ocean caught the edge of my coat, lifting it like wings. For a second, I could almost feel him there, that calm presence, that quiet strength. Maybe he'd finally found peace. Maybe I had too. Life didn't go back to normal, but it went forward. The story became a book. The book became a movement. The Brooks Foundation for Investigative Truth launched 6 months later. We funded journalists who'd lost their jobs for chasing stories that mattered. I never used Nicholas's name publicly. Some debts stay sacred. But every time someone asked where the first donation came from, I smiled and said, an old friend who believed in second chances. One night, almost a year later, I found myself back at the docks where everything ended. The air was cold and clean, stars stretching endless over the water. I sat on the edge and pulled out my recorder, the same one I'd used at that fundraiser, the night our world changed. I pressed record. This is Selena Brooks, I said softly. Today marks 1 year since the release of the Romano files. The truth is out, but truth isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. My father taught me that. So did the man who kept his promise to him. I paused, listening to the sea. If you're hearing this, remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do with it. So tell your stories, even if no one believes you yet, especially then. I stopped the recording and smiled through the tears. Somewhere out there, I hoped he was listening. When I left the dock, I saw something that made me freeze. A single white envelope sitting on the hood of my car. No footprints, no sound, just the envelope. I picked it up carefully, heart racing. Inside was a folded piece of paper, one sentence in that familiar, elegant handwriting. Truth never dies. It just waits to be found. No signature. But I knew. A small laugh escaped me. Half disbelief, half hope. Maybe it was a note he'd left before the end. Maybe it was someone else continuing his work. Or maybe, just maybe, Nicholas Romano had found a way to keep one last promise. I looked out at the ocean and whispered into the wind, "You always were impossible to kill." The breeze shifted, warm and soft against my face, and for the first time, the silence didn't hurt. Months later, I stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. to accept an award I never wanted, the National Freedom of Press Medal. I thanked my father. I thanked every whistleblower who risked everything. And then, without naming him, I thanked the man who showed me that redemption is another form of truth. The audience applauded, but I wasn't listening, because somewhere beyond the crowd, at the back of the hall, I saw a figure, tall, familiar, dressed in black. He turned just enough for the light to catch the scar on his arm. Then he was gone. My breath caught. I didn't chase. Some stories don't need an ending, just a beginning rewritten. Later that night, I wrote the final line of my book. Truth is a dangerous gift. It costs what it's worth. But when you find someone willing to carry it beside you, hold on. Because that's not just truth. That's love. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The city glowed below, alive again. And for the first time in 13 years, I wasn't running anymore. I was free. If you lost everything chasing the truth but found love, courage, and purpose along the way, would you still call it loss? Tell me what you think below. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.